Maybe for anyone that isn't fully aware, just explain where we are now, or where we are till 2027, we think.
Oh, where shall I start? Coming to pretty much the first time where actually really a mortgage is cheaper than monthly rent.
Yeah. You can ask for more, but market forces are at play. Just because you ask for it doesn't mean you're going to get it.
And what will happen is other landlords will see that property being advertised for that amount and think that that's the market. You can advertise a property for anything you like. Doesn't mean that that's what you're actually going to get in terms of rent. These homeowners are consciously making the decision. They're not going out and buying something as an investment, but they're thinking, you know, if this works out financially for us, you know, why not? If you're an investment landlord and you're looking for a property and you have, you know, this is your budget, this is what you're looking for, and what we're finding is maybe that's the hardest point at the moment.
Hello, welcome back. It's the ESPC Show, episode
4.
Indeed. And it's Paul, and it's
Megan.
So it is. And today, we're going to be talking about lettings, and it's a good old episode.
Yeah, we speak all about the type of landlord that we maybe would have referred to as a reluctant landlord.
Yeah, got a new name for him.
Yeah, so you'll have to listen to find out what the new name is. Talking about current homeowners who might be able to retain their property when they might be moving abroad, or they might be moving in with a partner, and then what the options are to rent out that. So yeah, a really interesting episode, isn't it?
Definitely. And at some point we put our tenants hat on and talk about what it means to be a tenant, how easy it is to become a tenant. And yeah, we've had Nicky on 3 or 4 times, but I did feel this is very much fresh content.
Yeah.
Episode. So
absolutely.
Without further ado,
here's the episode.
Well, here we are. It's the ESPC Show, and it's the Lettings edition. And who better to talk about lettings than you? No, you. Okay. We've got Nicky from ESPC Lettings here, and yeah, welcome.
Thanks for inviting me along. Yeah.
Again, what, 3?
I think this might be the 4th time.
Really?
I think maybe even 5th.
No.
Okay.
Well, there you go.
Due to popular demand,
Maybe.
you're back, Nicky. I thought it'd be worthy, because I think the last couple of times you've been on, we've been talking about the rent controls, rent caps, the spectre of what's coming. Yeah. We do have some clarity on that. It's probably a good place to start, isn't it? So maybe for anyone that isn't fully aware, just explain where we are now, or where we are till 2027, we think. Or beyond.
Well, yeah, I was like, where shall I start? So for the last year, we've been in that position where there wasn't really a rent cap, but tenants could still appeal and take it to the rent officer who reviewed the rent increase. They had this tapering system, and really there was never going to be a rent increase that was going to be more than, say, 12%. So whilst in theory the landlord could increase the rent by any amount, there was always that little bit that was able to kind of hold them back if a tenant did appeal. So from the 1st of April, that's changing, and the tenants will no longer be able to refer to a housing officer for them to make a decision. So essentially, once an increase has been proposed, then that's the increase that's been proposed, and that's what will go ahead. There has been chats about what's going to happen in between kind of tenancies, and there maybe being rent caps in between tenancies, but these are likely to be proposed only in rent control areas, which currently there are none of in Edinburgh. So I think that's still a little bit kind of up in the air as to how they're going to actually do that. But the headline news, I think, really is landlords can increase during a tenancy by any amount. And from the 1st of April, the tenants are not going to be able to appeal that through an independent rent officer like they have been before. Okay,
and as far as we know, that new will is probably going to be like that until 2027, we think? Could be indefinite. But
I think so. They've made lots of changes and things have...
Yes.
There have been lots of different ideas and changes, and they've been pretty regular, so who knows?
You may get some Trump tariffs.
Who knows? Yeah. But I would anticipate that they seem to be quite happy with this arrangement. The Scottish Government seem to be thinking that this is the way forward, so I'm not thinking there'll be any changes until 2027. But yeah, as we said, who knows?
Okay. Well, we can talk about, in some ways, as you say now, that the handbrake's off, so to speak. You can ask for more, but market forces are at play. Just because you ask for it doesn't mean you're going to get it. And I think there's been a slight sea change just generally in the lettings market in terms of just speed of let and maybe people asking for rent and not getting it. Do you want to maybe elaborate a little bit on that, Nicky?
That's definitely what... First of all, what I would say is for the properties that we manage, when we are contacting landlords to say, you can increase your rent, a lot of our landlords are coming back to us to say, we're happy with our tenants, we're happy to keep the rent as it is. So a lot of those tenants are staying on that same rent level. And then you have the properties that are out there on the open market where landlords are setting their rents quite high. And what we're seeing is that tenants are just not in a position or want to pay those high rents that have been set by something that's on the open market.
Right.
So
is that all aspects of the market, or is this the higher end, the lower end?
Definitely the higher end. Once you tip over kind of 1,000, 1,200, once you kind of get over that, I would say, is where people are more cautious about what they're spending on the rent. The one-bedroom properties that many years ago were only getting 500 a month, are now getting 800. And that is still, they are still really popular. They are the ones that we are still getting the most interested in because they are the cheapest properties that are available to rent.
And let's be honest, wages haven't kept pace maybe with some of the increments.
Absolutely not.
In fact, we had, we'll be covering this in another show, when we had a letter in from someone who was talking about this.
Yeah, we did. And also, actually, just something that popped into my head. I saw something online the other day, which was a property investor saying that their flat was up for rent. It was a 2-bedroom in Newington. It was up for £2,250
Wow.
a month. I mean, it was gorgeous, but I thought, who is the market for that? They had promoted it as a student accommodation, and I thought, I'd love to have had parents for that.
We're back to the parents discussion again, aren't we?
I know, but and what will happen is other landlords will see that property being advertised for that amount and think that that's the market. You can advertise a property for anything you like. Doesn't mean that that's what you're actually going to get in terms of rent. So then other people will start to see that and think, right, okay, well, this must be the market level. And especially if it's maybe a private landlord who's not maybe so in touch with the market and seeing what's happened. They've only got maybe one, two, just a kind of small portfolio, and they don't maybe know kind of what's happening in the wider market to set the rents. But certainly tenants are becoming more cautious with what they're looking to spend, definitely.
And so I think in summary, I think what you're saying, Nicky, is that the sort of the first time tenant sort of bottom end of the market, things are still moving relatively well. But as people have maybe pushed the rent a little higher, there's more competition, things are taking longer. And maybe people are doing the maths between, do I rent or do I buy? It's not a straightforward calculation because clearly there's costs associated with buying.
Because I think we're coming to pretty much the first time where actually really a mortgage is cheaper than monthly rent. Okay, to get a deposit and all of those things to get started is still needing a big chunk. But moving forward, I think on a monthly basis, we are at the stage now in Edinburgh, certainly, where probably rent is more than mortgage repayments.
But I think maybe the take home from this particular section now is, Nicky, if you price it competitively and you're not overly optimistic and you listen maybe to the letting agent, you're probably going to be all right.
Absolutely. And if it's set at the right rent, you'll get a good amount of people interested in that property. And then we're back to that situation where, great, we've got loads of people interested, we can make sure that we're getting the right tenant, instead of thinking, right, I'll push for this rent, I've only really got one potential. Are they the greatest? I'm not sure, but they're going to pay me the rent. So, it's a fine balance, and lots of the landlords of the properties we manage are much happier to have good, reliable, long-term tenants that are paying a reasonable rent. We always want to keep it reasonable. You don't want to lag too far behind, but that's what's really important, I would say, to our landlords chatting to.
Makes sense, because that void period, even if it's 4 weeks or 6 weeks, it's a couple of grand, isn't it? So, you know, if for the sake of an extra £100 or £200, that do the maths.
Because it's rent you're missing out, you're going to have to pay the utilities, you're going to have to pay council tax for you know, kind of any void period. So, it's always, I wouldn't say some income's better than no income, because you still want to be, you know, as in a landlord, you're an investor, so you still want to be, you know, making money, if you like. So, you know, you still want to have that balance right.
Yeah. Sorry, Megan, I've been hogging all
No, not a problem at all. So something that we wanted to talk about, Nicky, something we've kind of spoken about in the business, is the idea of, we've called them reluctant landlords, but maybe it's
accidental
surprise
landlords.
accidental landlords. That's accidental
Yeah.
landlords. So that's kind of maybe a couple who both have separate properties.
Yeah.
They're moving in together, maybe hesitant to sell both of their previous properties, and maybe think that they could use one of the, say it's like 2 1-bedroom flats, maybe one they want to keep one as a buy to let. that's the word. So yeah, what are you seeing more of this in the
Definitely.
market?
So I think that phrase reluctant landlords came around a while ago, when people were maybe they couldn't sell, you know, or you know, they were in the negative equity and they thought, well, you know, I'm going to have to do this. Whereas I think what's happening now is these homeowners are consciously making the decision. They're not going out and buying something as an investment, but they're thinking, you know, if this works out financially for us, you know, why not? And it is quite a lot. We might have, like you say, couple, so each individually own their own property and they're moving in together. They either buy something new together and are renting both of their properties out, or one moves in with the other and they rent out the other. We've got landlords that are maybe working away for a period of time, so they don't want to take their foot off the property ladder whilst they're away, so they'll keep their property here and rent that out for a period of time. I mean, some can be away for up to kind of 10 years, but their plan is always to, you know, return back, and rather than think, you know, I'll sell up now and who knows what it's going to be like in 10 years time, they decide to rent it in the meantime. So it's not reluctant or really accidental, I guess. It's people are almost making this decision.
Strategic.
Yeah, maybe it is more strategic. It's just not those people that are thinking, I'm going to go and buy an investment property. It's people that already have the properties and are wanting to make the best out of what they've already got, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, that's definitely a big increase of what we've seen.
And how straightforward is it to kind of go from owning a property to then renting it out?
Well, if you use the right agents, really easy. So it's pretty straightforward. So what the property owner needs to do is contact their mortgage lender and apply for a consent to let.
And in your experience, is that almost a given? Or?
Absolutely, okay. Absolutely. And that is pretty much it. Once they've made the decision, the numbers stack up, then we would just work with them to prepare the property, get everything ready. And in most instances, we've got somebody new ready to move in when they're moving out. So they've got kind of no void period. So it works really well, actually, yeah.
And do they often keep these properties furnished or unfurnished?
Mostly furnished, I would say. Mostly furnished. If they're moving in with somebody else, they maybe take a few bits and pieces. If they're going away travelling or working away, you know, they're going to be leaving, so they just leave it as is. So most, I would say, is furnished. That's still probably what most tenants are looking for.
What are the legal responsibilities then if you want to become a landlord?
So once you've notified your mortgage lender, then that's fine. Then all you need to do, I suppose, is make sure that you and your property are ready for the rental market. So the owner of the property, this is everybody that's noted on the deeds, needs to register as a landlord. They need to register with the council where the rental property is based. It's them declaring that they are the owner of the property, that they're in a position to rent it. They're given a landlord registration number, and that legally needs to be displayed in any advert and in any lease documents. So you need to do that before we can even get the property on the market.
Which is good, isn't it? It means it's not going on the ground.
Exactly.
A landlord has to adhere to the regulations and safety standards and all those other things, which is important these days.
And it's demonstrating to a potential tenant, you know, this landlord is, you know, above board, they've registered, they're agreeing with everything, they've got all of the safety requirements. Are there others that are not doing it? Probably, and those are the ones that I would always encourage a tenant to avoid. We have lots of tenants that come to us that say, you know, do you manage this, or is it the landlord that I'm going to contact? Because tenants much prefer to deal with an agency than a landlord, so that's interesting. But yeah, other legal things, gas checks, electric checks, smoke alarms, Legionella, risk assessments. So just ensuring that the property is safe. So as a landlord, you are providing a safe and secure property for your tenants, and a tenant knows that that's what they're getting as well. So they have this required certificates, and everything is provided.
And those legislations can change, can't they? Because the Legionella came in a few years ago, I think.
Yeah, so gas and electric has
That's why I'm not having any
always...
water. I'm just holding off.
So gas and electric has always been something that needed to be checked. The smoke alarms, the type of smoke alarms, that's something that's evolved over time as well. Before it was, you know, we were fine with battery ones, then they had to be mains wired, now they're just interlinked via radio, and they have to be in different rooms. So that has evolved, although I think where we're at now with the smoke alarms is probably where we're at. But yeah, the Legionella was something that was fairly new, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I guess now, because I don't know what happens to time, but it seems to fly by. So yeah, there are new things. There are things also that we need to be checking, that things like lead in the water and stuff like that. So yeah, they are always evolving.
And I suppose that, in a roundabout way, is why you use a letting agent as opposed to doing it yourself. Because if you do it yourself, you've kind of got to stay up to speed on these things, haven't you?
And that's it. And I think that's the advice that I always give to people is, if you're looking to manage a property yourself, that's fine, but you need to be aware that you need to keep up to date with the legislation. You need to have the time to be able to spend on these things, and it is constantly changing. The rent reviews, all of these things have been changing so frequently. I think if, you know, this is my job, this is what I do all day, it's my job to make sure I'm up to date. If I'm a landlord that's busy with family and my job, keeping up to date with these things is much more difficult.
And if you miss something, what's the implications? I suppose if something
well,
could get dark here, but if something really bad happens to a tenant, and let's be serious about this, these things have happened, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You are liable as the landlord, I would imagine.
So if you have failed to have your electric safety check carried out, and you haven't had, or you don't have the correct fuse board installed in the property, and it goes on fire and things are burnt down, people are injured, then as a landlord, then that's your responsibility. There are things, you know, landlords aren't responsible for, you know, a tenant tripping over the step as they come down the stairs, because, you know, that's something a tenant needs to be. But having safety checks carried out and the resulting kind of consequences, then they are the responsibility of the landlord.
Just on that point, Nicky, remind us, insurance, so for the property itself, and again, I would imagine an insurer would say, well, that's all void because you've not got the right...
Yeah, so for insurance, the landlord needs to insure the buildings. Anything that they have in the property, contents-wise, they insure. Anything a tenant brings with them, then they need to insure. But yeah, if there was a fire and they found out that the smoke alarms weren't fitted correctly or weren't to the required standards, then...
Null and void.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's cheer things up a bit.
I know, I feel like this is not always doom and gloom, but...
I guess one of the other things we wanted to chat about was maybe what are some of the biggest challenge, we've probably maybe covered this, but some of the biggest challenge if you are a new landlord, becoming a landlord, what are those challenges?
I guess maybe finding a property. So if you're an investment landlord and you're looking for a property and you have, you know, this is your budget, this is what you're looking for, and what we're finding is maybe that's the hardest point at the moment. A lot of investment landlords, their main competition is first-time buyers. They're looking at those same types of properties, the ones where they're not going to have to pay too much tax. So I think what they're finding is competition can be quite stiff in actually managing to secure a property, and those first-time buyers that they're competing against, they're buying with their heart. They're excited. It's their first home. They'll push a little bit further, whereas the investors are kind of like, right, no, okay, that's not within my budget. I'm going to have to go to the next one. So I think it's almost at the very beginning is finding the right property can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. And then once you've got that, you've got plenty of advice and agents around to help you kind of navigate the next step. So maybe finding the right one at the moment could be a little bit tricky.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because of that almost shows a shift in the market a little bit, because the first time buyers were previously saying landlords are our biggest competitors because they had more capital up front that they could bid over. But it's interesting that almost the first time buyers are now so used to that they've built up a bigger stash.
I think so. I think it's so they will always be in competition because that's the nature of the type of property that they're looking. But I think it is maybe a little bit, the scales have tipped slightly the opposite direction.
That's really interesting. And again, I think last time you were on, we talked about Nicky's pin. Remember that? About, I think you said from the castle. And then you would draw. And then
I do my here's the pin,
radius,
and then
Does that still apply? Would you still say that's where it's at? So that demand.
Yeah, I would say so. So we have had properties that have been a little bit further out of my 2-mile magic radius, and they are slower to rent without a doubt. There are not as many people looking to rent the further you go out of the city. Whether it's because more people actually buy a little bit further out, so they've got a little bit more competition, or they're renting, then maybe their mindset is they want to be closer to the city centre. But certainly the further that you go out, the tougher it is, I would say, to secure tenants.
But in saying that, the likes where it's good transport links, so I'm going to mention it again, we do in every show, someone like Leith.
Pretty
good.
I mean, that's always going to be pretty much. So if you're on a tram route, you're pretty good. If there's a selection of shops, including somewhere like a Sainsbury's local, a Tesco, a Metro, if you've got one of those close by to you, they seem to be popular.
We are not sponsored by either, just to be clear, but that's interesting.
But kind of somewhere where you can just nip to the shops. Not everybody does have a car, and especially given getting in and around the city now, they've got the low emission zone. There's even few people using cars, so people want to be on a tram route, a bus route, have those local shops so that they can just nip in and out and without having to travel. So those are things that definitely are what tenants are looking for, I would say.
So just before we wrap up, I thought maybe let's just take a little step back, talk about those strategic landlords, not the reluctant landlords.
Is that what we're going to call it? Okay.
If someone, if there's somebody sitting, maybe they're away to go work abroad and they're thinking, don't want to sell, what kind of things do they have to consider before they make that step to actually commit? I'm going to become a landlord. Is there anything to consider?
I think they just need to do their sums. I think is the main thing. So whilst some people might just be really keen to keep hold of that property so that when they do return they've still got something and they can take a bit of a hit in the meantime, then that's up to them. But for a lot of other people, then they can't afford to do that. So it's really having a look at the figures, making sure that you know what your outgoings are, what your outgoings will continue to be, and what your income is going to be. So how much rent? Think about, yes, I'm going to get this in rent, but I'm still going to have to pay potentially letting agent fees. You'll need money aside for any repairs or maintenance because that boiler that you've been living with for the past 8 years is probably being fine, but you can guarantee the minute you hand it over, it will break and you'll need a new one. So it's not being caught out by any surprises of work that might need to be kind of done at the property. So always have that, give yourself a little bit of a financial cushion, I would say. So in the event of any work being needed at the property, you're not just kind of living from your next rent to the next rent to the next rent. You want to provide yourself at least with a couple months of cushion should that happen. So I guess once they've stacked up the figures, that's the main decision maker, I would say.
And you guys can help people make those do the
Yeah,
sums?
absolutely, yeah. So we would go through, obviously, what they could achieve in rent, give them an indication of what they should be able to get, chat about the fees, give them an idea of how much the safety certificates and checks cost, chat about kind of floats, how much you want to have in the bank as a reserve. So yeah, we can go through everything like that with them.
Okay, I've got a tenants question.
Oh, perfect.
Would this be a good time?
Hot off the press.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to put my tenant's hat on
Okay.
now. So we were asked this question: if a tenant was, if somebody was had a mortgage, so living in a home, and then it was a matrimonial split. This isn't me, by the way. I'm just saying. And
Asking for a friend.
and then decides to move out and moves into a rented property.
Yes.
So when you're doing the calculations, the financial test, if you like,
Yeah.
I guess the mortgage payments, if they're still going to continue to make that, is part of that consideration. Is it how does it work? And I suppose the bigger question is, what is the application process, and how do we decide if a tenant can afford a property?
So as part of our referencing checks, we check affordability. And that is not just based on what the rent is against what they earn. It is a calculation that's done of all of their outgoings against their monthly income. So it will be everything that they're spending out and everything they get in. The referencing agency that we use HomeLet. They then issue an affordability, and they let us know how much per month that particular person has got as disposable income. And then we can see obviously where that fits in with rent, and if it works, then that's great. But yeah, it takes everything into account. So there may be, again, I speak about kind of private landlords that are maybe taking references up themselves, and they'll just find out what somebody earns, but they don't necessarily know what else they're spending. Whereas when you're using an agency who will get professional checks done, then they check more than just that singular income and how much the rent is. We'll get a bigger picture of what they can afford.
It's interesting because that's an aspect we haven't really touched upon, so it's good to get that insight, isn't it? And I suppose the advice to any tenant or potential tenants is probably to go early, isn't it? And almost get, I mean, can you get like some sort of passport or something that says this is what, is that common?
So
does
there
that happen?
is a kind of a rental CV that you can apply for.
Right.
So you would apply to your current agent, and they will give you stars on on your financial performance, just how you are as a tenant, how you keep the property, and then you create a little bit of a CV so that you can present that to a future landlord. What that doesn't do is tell them that you can afford something.
Sure.
It just says that you're nice, hopefully.
But in a highly competitive market, these things could make the difference.
There's no harm in having something like that in advance. It's quite a nice thing to do, but it doesn't say what they can afford.
Or if you're a first-time tenant, do you kind of wait until you've seen
until you've got a little bit of rental history behind you. But what I would say is, particularly in terms of that check-in income against rent, is that we've had on paper people that are earning a good salary, and you think they'll be able to easily afford this rent. But what that doesn't show until the checks are done is how many other things they're paying out for. And in fact, it's been pretty tight, if not manageable at all. So it's a bigger check that we're able to carry out.
We were talking about that the other week on the mortgage show, weren't we? About, maybe it's building and contents insurance or something else, or something that you've got on. Was it Klarna?
Klarna.
You know,
I've heard of that.
But these are all debts, aren't they, in some ways?
Yeah,
in some shape or form.
Yeah, and your car payments and everything like that.
So, and it can be things that you've forgotten about.
Well, it is.
An old mobile phone contract or something like that. That it's just. There's all sorts. They say, isn't it, you should check your direct debits to see exactly what you're paying out, because there'll be some subscription or some old thing that's loitering around there that you could probably get rid of.
Yeah, thank you, OT, for my 12-month subscription to the Disney Channel, which I never use. But it happens, doesn't it? You
Absolutely.
just, these things would sometimes end up free, suddenly start costing you. You don't always check these things when you should. So there you go, some advice there. Thank you.
There you go. We can diversify in advance.
So okay, I think we'll do one last question.
You go for it.
So Nicky, what if you could tell every new landlord one thing that they need to know? What would it be?
Oh, wow.
Choose ESPC Lettings.
Oh, Paul, that was
Thank
good. And you didn't even have to think about that.
TikTok advert there.
If I could choose, what would I say to them? Okay, that's hard. Other than obviously choose the ESPC Lettings, is just to go into it with your eyes open and get all of the advice available. There's lots of free advice available. You know, we've got webinars, we've got these podcasts, we have events. There's lots of information out there. Is do as much fact finding, go in there with your eyes open, get all of the information available so that nothing comes as a surprise to you further down the line, is what I would say.
And I suppose you've got to, as we're told for our own sort of ESPC investments, you've got to take a longer horizon. Can't just be those 6 months, because you're sinking in.
Yeah.
Probably a lot with the ADS, aren't you? So you're not going to get that back immediately. It's got to be a 3, 5, 10-year project, I would imagine.
I think there was a time where, you know, people were just doing it for a relatively short period, and they were making quite a lot of money per month, and that's not really happening now. You want to cover yourself, absolutely, but the goal for most investment landlords, let's say, is the long term, so that they're building that capital growth. Yeah.
Nicky, that was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you go. That was the episode. That was the strategic landlord episode.
Yeah, we did not know that's what it would be called.
No, it became, that was like in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are a potential future strategic landlord, you can get in touch with Nicky and the team at ESPC Lettings. We'll put all of the information in the show notes below and how you can get in touch with them. And you can also find out everything you need to know about becoming a landlord on our website. We've got loads of free information, as Nicky mentioned, as well.
Or as we say, you know, as we discussed at the very end there, if you think about you want to go and rent somewhere and the tenancy side, again, have a chat with Nicky. We'd be happy to give some advice about what it means to be a tenant and your financial obligations around that. So hopefully you found that of some value. So for everything from both of us, it's been great to see you. Thanks for listening, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing. Our numbers are up.
Our numbers are up, but we would love them to go up.
Indeed. We're not quite TikTok famous yet, but we're getting there.
So if you can subscribe wherever you're watching or listening, that'd be great. And otherwise, we will be back in a fortnight's time.
We will see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.